So I just say hello again, greet everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my Dhamma friends. So I'm going to talk about 16 upakilesa. It's like the main dark negative qualities that affect beings' minds, which when we make karma with them, bind us to the wheel of samsara. It's very helpful if we have become familiar with this list, and I'll tell you why. One of the main ways that delusion tricks us is a feeling of self-righteousness. And as we were just talking about, the self-view isn't something which should be trusted. But when there's that feeling of I'm right, we need to understand the meaning of delusion. Delusion means you're deluded. That means when you're wrong, you're going to feel like you're right. That's what delusion is. That's one way of understanding delusion. You're completely deluded and you think you know. You're having an unwholesome mind state and you're sure that you're right. Welcome to ignorance and delusion. Something that we're all very familiar with. Now, the thing about, but which we don't recognize for what it is. Now, knowing this list will help us, because when we go through these qualities, it will help us to understand, oh, this isn't something that I should trust. Lord Buddha is saying that this is a dark quality which darkens my mind, deludes my mind, binds me to the wheel of samsara. This is something I shouldn't feed or believe. This is something I should let go of. So, the first one, covetousness and unrighteous greed. So the definition here explains that covetousness is for the things that one possesses or the things that one has. One is very attached to. So if you're a Chinese businessman, you might really like your BMW. If you're a Chinese woman, you might like your diamond ring. So think about it, whatever it is, think of the thing that you have that you really like. Think of your favorite thing. The thing that you like most of all. Think about it, what is it? We all have it. The thing that we like most of all. Okay, so if you think about giving it away, okay, now you can tell yourself, test yourself, can you give that thing away today? Whatever it is. So it could be your wife or your husband, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. If you've just fallen in love, you might have a feeling like you totally love that person. You want to spend your whole life with them. And there's that feeling of, this is my fiance, my wife, and I love her. Wonderful. Unfortunately, that feeling often doesn't last forever. But at least to get a sense for what this is, the thing that you love, the thing that you really like, can you give it away today? Most people will find, there's resistance. Yeah, no, that's my thing. Okay, that's covetousness. Greed, the things of other people's that you might like or want, or things that you don't have yet that you want. But that can also be greed for sensual experiences, for example. So this is kind of more obvious than some of the others. I think most of us know that greed is unwholesome, and we try to keep it within parameters. But some people don't know that. Some people have enough money and still work for more. And so sometimes we don't recognize that greed is affecting the mind, because this is the thing about what I'm talking about. The self-view will justify it. I have 10 million baht. I have 20 million baht. But if I have 50 million baht, I'll be able to support lots of monks. Meanwhile, the monks are saying, we would like you to meditate more. We would like you to practice contentment with what you have. But some lay people are thinking, yeah, but when I have 50 million baht, when I have 100 million baht, I'll be able to support the monks. So keep an eye on that. There is definitely a certain point where enough is enough. And we have to be, we don't know when we're going to die, and we have to be focused on our practice enough so that when the moment of death comes, we're mindful and aware of it, and we're ready to let go. And we've taken the opportunities we had to practice and practiced, because it's a rare and precious opportunity. Second, kilesa, ill will. So this is wishing harm. So usually there's a progression, isn't there? Somebody said something you didn't like, a painful feeling arises in the heart. This is why it's important to have that mindfulness established in the heart area. You want to be aware of that feeling as it's arising, because what comes next? And usually when it's accumulated, they say it again, they say it again. So you might have a stubborn or rebellious teenager, and you tell them what you think is good advice, and they roll their eyes, or they walk out the door, or they slam the door, or they tell you to shut up. I heard it already. It's my life. Whatever. And that feeling of not getting the desired response, feeling hurt, and some ill will can develop. Also, if you're watching news, things like that, you hear news, somebody's being really, really mean. Movies are terrible. Movies are terrible because they really play into this good guy, bad guy, and you're supposed to love the hero, but you hate the villain. And then what happens is you really, really want the bad guy to be killed or tortured or obliterated. So this is something to be careful of, because this is feeding ill will. And if we are good Buddhist practitioners, the more bad a person is, we understand that their mind is heavily affected by negativity, and the appropriate Buddhist response is compassion. How can I help that person? How can I restrain them from making such bad karma? How can I teach them? How could I help liberate them from samsara? You're not thinking, shoot the bastard, yeah, go to hell, you know, which is the content of a lot of movies, isn't it? So we also do have to be, and computer games, oh my God, that's really bad. You're kind of upgrading your weapons, you're punching them, throwing them off cliffs, blowing them up. Yeah, be careful. So we have to be careful of the ways we feed these things, because if these qualities, the thing about the kilesa is the more karma we make with them, the more powerful they become. The more powerful they become, the more frequently they return into the mind. It's like you understand that whatever you make karma with, it's like a circle. It's going and it's going to come back. When you next have that mind state, it'll be thicker and stronger and more powerful, and it'll be coming around more often. So this is why we have to do the metta bhavana. It pacifies and weakens the ill will. And try not to feed it. We already have quite a bit of it. If somebody, just think, if somebody really hurts your feelings, and you see this all the time in the newspapers, somebody fell in love, they had the fabulous wedding, they had the fabulous honeymoon, somebody cheated on somebody, and then the one that you used to love, you now want to kill. You want them to feel as much pain as they made you feel. Where did the love go? Well, the thing is, there wasn't just love there. There was the sensual craving and the greed. And then when and it was a lot of attachment. And then when they didn't do what you thought they should do, that attachment, because it's based in attachment, became hatred, anger, resentment. So where there is love, there is also suffering. And loving kindness is not romantic love. It's not passionate love. It's altruistic. It's goodwill. Anger, number 3. Angriness, hatred, hating, hatefulness, irritation, irritability. So that's important to understand. It's the second hindrance, this whole spectrum. Impatience, irritability, anger, becoming eventually at its worst, hatred. The thing I was talking about before, self-righteousness justifying things. We think that self-righteous anger is okay. He really shouldn't have done that. So I have a right to be angry. The thing about acknowledging and understanding kilesa is kilesa. We're acknowledging that our mind is affected by a negative quality, and we're not justifying it. It is on one level understandable that unenlightened beings still experience these things, but we have the truthfulness to admit this is an unwholesome mental quality that I'm experiencing, that Lord Buddha says I should abandon. Resentment. So the definition here, in the past there was anger, later there is hostility as an accumulation of persistence, a strengthening of anger. So it becomes deep-seated. You just see a person, they haven't even said anything or done anything wrong today, but because of all of the previous things they said to hurt your feelings, you resent them. So it's a withholding of loving kindness, and it's a holding of a fixed negative perception. This is where the practice of forgiveness is very important. So we forgive people so that we don't do that, so that we don't develop resentment, so that we can have a bright, light, spacious, wholesome mind, which doesn't have negative qualities with tentacles stuck in it, ready to react every time you see the person who hurt you. So we forgive others for ourselves as well. And forgiving others doesn't mean that you have to trust people. It's like you can know that somebody is untrustworthy, capable of hurting you, causing harm, and you still forgive them. You forgive them because forgiveness creates merit, apayatana it's called, and it relieves you of the burden of having a grudge and of resentment. So contempt. So this is described here as disregarding. If somebody helps you and then it's like a lack of gratitude. Or if someone teaches you, disregards the instructions and guidance. So that's important, this wholesome dharma of katanyu and katavedi, being grateful for what is given and knowing what has been given, and then one makes efforts to behave appropriately in a way which demonstrates that gratitude and respect. So I think a lot of parents do experience this with children, don't they, in the modern age, that give the children a lot and they don't feel that the children are very grateful, because a lot of media and society doesn't teach gratitude and respect towards elders. It kind of teaches rebelliousness, and it respects, popular culture respects strong willfulness and strong individuality, and so it's very different to the traditional Buddhist values, Confucian values, respects to elders, gratitude, etc. So it is very common, and that's the quality that the kids might be experiencing, where they're not aware of what has been given. many people I meet who worked very hard, who didn't come from such wealthy families, but who became wealthy. And then when they have kids, they want their kids to have the best of everything. They don't want them to suffer like they did. They want it to be easier for them. And then the kids end up kind of the spoiled brats that don't recognize the value of what was given to them and aren't grateful because they don't know what it means to have to work hard, and they don't know what it means to go without. So I've been writing a little bit of a biography for the sake of my permanent residency application, and I was thinking about the way I was brought up by my parents. I'm very grateful because at the time, when I was a teenager, my parents did not give us any pocket money at all. And we lived in a middle-class area where everyone else was getting $10, $15, $20 a week. And meanwhile, we didn't get a cent. And what had happened was earlier on, my parents had had some bad investments and they went bankrupt. And so they were in the process of trying to own a home again. And they didn't want to be a burden to their children. They wanted to take care of themselves when they were older. So they were saving their money. And my dad would actually extend the house that they would buy a house, and my dad would build it was a very beautiful lesson that I learned from my parents was when life gets hard, when life gets tough, to work harder. And so my dad was a white collar worker, but on the weekends he learnt how to build. He became an owner builder, and he would build an extra bedroom, an extra bathroom, an extra sitting room, an extra balcony. So he's working Monday to Friday, and then he's working Saturday and Sunday. And then they'd sell the house, they'd get another smaller house, they'd extend that house, and basically after 10 years, they owned their house again. From bankruptcy at 45 to owning a house again at 55, through working very, very hard. Now, they didn't give us any money, but they did pay for our school, and we were very well fed. And my mother would drive me to the Burger King to work, and my dad would pick me up. So they supported their children to work. And my twin brother worked in the Pizza Hut, and my younger brother worked in a place called Tucker's Diner at the Shell service station. So my parents were driving around, picking up and dropping off the kids. And they really taught us the value of money and that you have to work for it. And what's interesting is, I don't think any of us children ever asked our parents for any money from the time we left home at the age of 18. We basically understood that, yeah, in this world you have to take care of yourself. Now, we were told by our parents that we were always welcome in their home, that they loved us, but we also understood that we had to pay our own way. And so what seemed like stinginess or too much, too rigid a position at that time as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, when I look back on it, I'm very grateful that my parents taught us the value of hard work and the value of money, and showed us how to, when life gets hard, work hard. So anyway, I don't have contempt for my parents. I have respect and gratitude. I did, though, when I was 15 and 16, I did. I thought they were stingy and mean. And when I look back, I think, no, they were responsible and wise. So the contempt has gone and the gratitude and respect is in its place. Insolence, sense of competitiveness, overpowering, of wanting to, that arises overpowering someone else, for example, towards a learned person. One thinks, what is the difference between you or me? So this is this case where somebody is more developed in an area and a person doesn't think that they are. So withholding of respect. Envy arises towards the gain, honor, respect, esteem, veneration, and reverence shown towards others. So I think everybody experiences it to different degrees. If you're not enlightened yet, if you're not an anagami, no greed and no hatred left, You'll experience these things. And so it's just recognizing that it's unwholesome, trying not to feed it. And this is where the Brahma Viharas I want to talk about. The Brahma Viharas are the antidotes to a lot of these things. So with regards to the anger and ill will, the metta is the remedy. With regards envy, it's the mudita, empathic joy, appreciative joy. And we have to have wisdom, spiritual power. Whatever praise, gain, honor, respect, veneration a person is experiencing is karmically conditioned. So the skillful things they did in the past is what gave rise to those conditions. So you might be sitting there thinking, it's not fair, I deserve it more. But if you did deserve it more, you would have got it. So we have to be humble sometimes. If you really deserved it more, you would have got it. But we can't see what the other person did in the other lives that we didn't do. And so things like paying respects to elders, arahants, Buddhas, bodhisattvas, Pacceka Buddhas, things like recollecting the presence of deities and rejoicing in their goodness, Devanusati, Buddhanusati, making offerings, all of those things. So it's if one has been reverent towards that which is noble, worthy of reverence for lifetimes, that's going to manifest as promotions, opportunities, praise, people liking you, etc. And if you find that you're in a situation where you thought you were getting a promotion and someone else got it, you thought you were getting a raise, someone else got it, and then it's like, well, we haven't practiced as much respect to elders and generosity in the past as other people. And falling into envy or competitiveness or resentment will not better your samsaric situation. But having mudita and humility and getting on with doing the things that you need to do to accumulate merit, make good karma, that will. Avarice, stinginess, meanness, niggardliness, unwillingness to share, regarding dwellings, gains, praise, even the Dhamma. Inability to endure sharing one's own fortune with others. Now this is interesting. Sometimes if we don't experience much of these things, because we might have cultivated more wholesome qualities in the past, like for myself, I really enjoy being generous, and the idea of not wanting to share something that one had is not a frequent flyer in my mind. I would say generosity parami is fairly well established. But when I asked Ajahn, what is the cause of all of these beggars in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh in India in this modern age, Ajahn said that those beings they either stole what belonged to others, or they were born wealthy and were stingy. They didn't share what they had. So they had a beggar's mind state. And so we don't want to be born as a beggar anywhere. And we want to have enough of the four requisites in all of our lives. So whatever you have that can be shared, share it within reason. You don't have to share it to the point where you're harming yourself. But if you do have something that can be shared, it's good to share it. The merit will benefit you. And when you need something, someone will give you what you need. Or if you like something, you will be able to have the things that you like. Deceit. Somebody misbehaves with body, by speech, by mind, for the purpose of concealing it. He forms the evil wish, may others not know this of me. Such deceit, deceptiveness, excessiveness, crookedness, craftiness, hiding, concealment, etc. is called deceit. So this is important. There's various ways to consider why these things are so harmful. It is recognizing the truth on a fundamentally deep level that is going to liberate us from every type of suffering. In order to recognize the truth on a fundamentally deep level, we cannot make karma with lies and deception. So whatever karma we make with lies and deception, we are literally making the dust in our eyes, the veil that obscures ultimate reality, we're making it thicker. Every little lie, every little exaggeration, and every big lie, or every act of conscious deceit, you're making karma with the opposite of truth. And we need to make as much karma as possible with truth, with truthfulness, so that we can be liberated for penetrating into deeper truth. It's the only way any being ever gets liberated. It's through seeing truth, the nature of the way things are. So we need to meditate very deeply on this, so that when we're tempted to, in the monk's life, we have to have a fortnightly confession. So we've got a lot of rules. So whichever of those rules we broke, we have to confess them. And it's a very important part of training, because you have to fess up. Whatever you did it. And another valuable thing about I've been very fortunate, because I lived with some great masters who can read minds. So when you live with other people who know what you did, there's not much point, or what you thought or what you said, there's not much point trying to hide it. They know. And this is very helpful. And you can go through some very painful paranoid mind states living close to beings like this. Fortunately, they're not hostile, malicious. They don't have ill will, thank goodness, because if they knew all of that and they wanted to harm you, they could make your life pretty miserable. But fortunately, beings who have that ability also have vast loving kindness. So they've seen it all before. And but living with people for a period of time who know the quality of your mind states and can recollect what you did, it helps you to train in not being deceitful. So, fraud. It's given the example of a fish pretending to be a snake, probably so that the snake won't eat it. Or yeah, pretending to be something that you're not. It's quite similar to deceit, but deceit's a bit like concealing, and the fraud is like actively doing something which is a misrepresentation of the truth. We don't want to make karma with that. Obstinacy, stiffness, harshness, inflexibility, high-headedness. So, in various ways, Lord Buddha tries to teach us in the 38 blessings in the Mangala Sutta. Lord Buddha says that humility is one of the highest blessings. Rivalry. There's a unwholesome and a wholesome type. So if you see a person dressed in ornaments and there arises a thought that you want to outdress that person, be more beautiful than that person, go and get a more fabulous outfit, more fabulous jewels, more fabulous shoes, whatever it is. For the guys, it might be you want the latest iPhone or a Rolex, whatever it is. It's like you're going to outshine a person with your status symbols, which golf club you belong to, or how big your penthouse is, these kind of things. So that's unwholesome, when you want to appear impressive and because you want to outdo another. But then there's a wholesome type. Suppose somebody's chanting something or studies something and you want to be learned like them, so you decide that you're going to know even more than them, but it's because of your desire to understand and they inspired you. So rivalry can have a wholesome spectrum. Conceit, elevation of the mind on account of social class. You think you're better. It's also described as 9 types of conceit. I went through that on a previous discussion a couple of weeks ago. Whenever you conceive of a self in relationship with another and you think that you're better or equal or worse, all of those are actually conceit. It's the conceit of self. But I think this is talking about essentially thinking that you're better, that type of conceit. Arrogance seems to, I can't quite tell the difference between conceit and arrogance, but it's sometimes described as excessive conceit. So a lot of conceit to the point that it became arrogant. Vanity. So in the suttas, it's talked about the vanity of youth, the vanity of health, the vanity of life, that the bodhisattva saw the old person, the sick person, and the corpse, and he became, he let go of the vanity of youth and life, didn't take those things for granted. But we can also understand it as like wanting to look beautiful, being proud of your beauty, that kind of thing. Negligence, letting the mind roam among the objects of sensual pleasure. So this is it's also sometimes described as heedlessness. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless, and the heedless are likened to the dead, Lord Buddha says. Because if you're heedless, there's not going to be any end to your births, which means there's not going to be any end to the deaths. Birth, 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 death, death, death. The heedless are likened to the death. Just let me plug in my, I just got a message that my battery will go flat. Okay, I think we're plugged in. Yeah, very good. Okay, so negative qualities, those are the 16 main negative qualities which darken the mind. And then when we meditate, we have to keep an eye out for them, because any speech that we make based on one of those qualities, or any actions that we make based on one of those qualities, is unwholesome karma, bad karma. So we don't want to make bad karma that binds us to the wheel of samsara and makes our life more difficult in the future. Bad karma will ripen as difficult situations, painful feelings, obstructions. So we don't want to act on negative mind states, because being motivated by negative mind states, because it will be creating obstructions for ourselves, and we have enough of them. So we need to recognize them. The metta practice and the mudita practice and the compassion practice, these are the antidotes. So when you train in establishing metta in the mind every day, the mind will become attenuated with that wholesome, altruistic mind state. And what will happen is it will recognize when something negative kind of suddenly drops in the mind. Oh, and there'll be a sense, an intuitive sense of, I don't trust that. That's just not nice. That's not good. But as I was saying, the self-righteousness can trick us. If somebody did something wrong, conventionally speaking, you feel justified in being angry. You feel justified in wanting to take revenge. These kind of things. So this is where we look at this list from time to time and understand that Lord Buddha is explaining to us, no, this is never wholesome. This is never justified. It's understandable because it arises because we've made karma with it in the past. So you don't hate yourself for experiencing these things. You have to be patient with them, because you're going to experience them for some time before you can let go of them. But don't justify them. And at the same time, you have to have compassion for the fact that you are still subject to them. So you don't hate yourself for negative mind states. This is another trick. It compounds negativity with negativity. Because there are negative mind states, you have to have metta for yourself, so that you find the energy and the resolve to purify your mind and rid yourself of these things. So be brutally truthful and kind and patient. It's tricky. Ruthlessly determined with a lot of patience and kindness. brutally truthful with humility and forgiveness. So middle way, it's always balancing. So then if you look at the 10 paramis, whatever comes up, whatever actions, thoughts, speech and actions we can do on these, based on these 10 virtues, that's going to be wholesome karma. So dana, anything that's based in generosity, is going to be good karma. I've forgotten the order. I know them all, but I've forgotten the order. Can you bring it up on the screen, JC? Dana. Many of us know the chant, don't they? Dana Barami, Sila
After dana
Barami.
is sila, Ajahn.
Yep, Dana, Sila. Yep,
Nikama.
okay, here we have them. Yep, renunciation. Yep. It's not so clear for me. Okay, read them out to me quickly. Dana, Sila, Nikama. It's not clear, JC, so read it to me.
You have to unmute, Jason. Nikama, Pana, Virya, Kanti.
Panya,
Virya,
Virya,
Kanti.
Kanti. Yep.
Sacha,
Satcha,
Adhitana,
Adhitana,
Metta,
Metta, Upeka.
Upeka.
Sorry, Ajahn, I was listening.
That's okay. Okay, so the paramis, the perfections. Here we have the examples of the Buddhas. They become Buddhas because they cultivate these qualities for a long time. It leads to Buddhahood. So this is the Buddha explains this to us. We're so grateful that we have the Buddhas who explain this to us. We need to be able to recognize what is a wholesome mind state, what is an unwholesome mind state, which ones do I want to make karma with, which ones do I not want to make karma with. And sometimes you just have to patiently endure with a negative mindset until it falls away from the mind. Just go and be by yourself, be in your bedroom, close the door and just wait it out. Don't go and say the thing you want to say. Don't go and do the thing you want to do that's unwholesome. So you really, really want to have an affair, or you have a partner and you're having an affair and you want to have casual sex as well. A lot of people in the modern world, because sex is so easy to have now with the apps and all these things, other people tell me about these things. So I've been celibate. I really have been celibate for 24 years. So it's possible. But before I was celibate, I wasn't celibate. So I do know. I do know about the way the mind can go in that direction. So suppose you really want to have an affair. No. Delete that app. Close the door, lock that door. Just wait. The mind state will cease. So there's a thing about kilesas is that they lie to us. This is something I'm glad I remembered, because this is important. Kilesas lie to you. They will say often, if you have this or if you do this, you will be happy. And often it's the case that if you have that and if you do that, you are not happy. You sometimes increase your misery. So you have to develop a sense of not trusting it. It might come and it might lie right in your face. Just do it just one more time and then you'll be happy. And you need to have enough mindfulness to say, you've said one more time 10 million times. I'm not buying it anymore. And then if it's the aversion thing, I can't believe they said it. And no, I'm just going to tell, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. And it's like, no. You can, sometimes you can say, if it's justified, if it's going to be skillful. But Lord Buddha teaches us with right speech that when you communicate what you think a person needs to hear, you do it without anger. So you actually have to wait for the anger to cease. And then you go and tell the person, you know, when you did this and this, I think that was unskillful for this reason and that reason. And he also says that you should ask permission of the other person. Excuse me, do you mind if I give you some feedback? And then it's like, but when the mind's got a full head of steam, you're angry, you're going to go and give them a piece of your mind and knock down the door. And you always do this, you never do that. And you said you did, you promised, and you lied, whatever. So wait for the mind state to cool down, because if you speak on it and act on it, you're making karma with that mind state. And then the way you affect other beings is the way you're going to be affected. Someone's going to come and yell at you, or someone's going to come and abuse you next time you do something wrong. But if you're patient and kind and skillful, when somebody does something wrong, unskillful to you, then you will have kind teachers manifesting in your future that help you to overcome your negative qualities skillfully, kindly, patiently. It's said that Sariputta was willing to admonish his students 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times, 500 times. Wow. For myself, I don't have that level of patience. I start to get really fed up at the 10th time. So, so that's a warning. But Sariputta was willing to remind 500 times. Sadhu. So, but that, you know, so if we want to meet patient teachers who are willing to train us and remind us and mention to us up to 500 times, well, then we need to have patience. So dana, thoughts of generosity, acting on that is skillful, good karma. Thoughts of being virtuous. This is a very interesting thing to understand. By not doing something, you make good karma. More karma than being generous. The world's very materialistic now, so we don't get this, but Ajahn explains it beautifully, that when you keep the 5 precepts, virtue blossoms in your mind. From refraining from doing certain things, the quality of virtue blossoms in your mind. Your true humanity becomes manifest. Don't understand that when it's like, just once, just one more time, just a little bit. That justifying, sneaky, no, it's when we don't do it just a little bit, we don't do it just one more time, that virtue becomes impeccable, unshakable, well established. And it's said that virtue is fragrant to devas' noses. Like if you're a truly virtuous person, your mind smells better than roses and sandalwood to the devas. So it's, and you, in a way you feel it. You feel when you keep the precepts for a period of time, you start to feel more well-being, you start to feel freedom from remorse. And then what happens, it's good to pay attention to, is when the kilesa comes and lies to you, go and have sex and just have one beer just once. And then the next day, that feeling of well-being, of goodness, of lack of remorse, it's dissipated, it's damaged. And this was something I learned reluctantly. When I first came to Buddha's practice, I wasn't convinced that the 5 precepts were necessary. And it was from living in meditation centers where I kept them, and then going to do a visa run in Malaysia and breaking a couple of precepts. I won't tell you which ones. You don't need to know the fine details. But and then coming back to the meditation center, I could see, wow, I felt better before breaking the precepts, and the kilesas were telling me, just do it once, it's fine, you're a young man, you need a bit of this, you need a bit of that, have some fun. And the well-being was more, and the desire would come up in the mind, but the desire came up in a clear mind, in a mind of a being who had self-respect and self-esteem. And then you go and you do the things that the kilesas tell you to do, and you come back and you don't like yourself as much, and you don't feel as much well-being, and there's restlessness and agitation. And so I had to go through that a couple of times before I had an interesting insight. The insight was, hey, maybe the Buddha actually knew what he was talking about. Can you imagine, after 4 Asankhya and 100,000 yons, the Buddha actually knows what he's talking about? The 5 precepts are helpful, probably necessary, if you really want to develop. So sila, nekama is renunciation. So thoughts of giving up sensuality and of things. Wisdom produces great merit. That's wisdom. What is wisdom? Seeing things as impermanent, not self, unsatisfactory. Virya, energy. Kanti, so practicing patience. This is what we have to do when the kilesas come up. We practice patience. You don't realize it at the time because it's a painful experience, but practicing patience produces merit. Lord Buddha in the Ovada Padimokkha, patient endurance is the supreme incinerator of defilements. Now, how is that experienced? You're patiently enduring a defilement. It feels like you're being incinerated. When the power of the defilement swells up in your mind, you're burning. But what you don't realize is that that's burning up and it's going to cease. Arising, staying for some time and ceasing. And if you don't make karma for it, the next time it comes around in your mind, it comes out around with less power, less force, and it comes around less often. So patient endurance is the supreme incinerator of defilements. We have to have faith in that. And then we apply the patience while we wait out these negative qualities. You can kind of, whatever metaphors work for you, you can imagine that this is like Luke Skywalker battling it out with Darth Vader. You know, it really is the force of lightness and the force of darkness. And Nibbana is superior to these. It transcends it. It transcends duality. But you're not going to realize Nibbana unless you make good karma and unless you relinquish the negative. So sometimes people try to justify, you don't need to, a half a glass of wine is fine. I meditate every day, I chant every day, I study these Dhamma, and half a glass of wine is medicinal. Okay, it is, but it weakens mindfulness, and the Buddha said don't do it. So, some people might have to reduce from 2 drinks a week to 1 drink a week to half a glass. As long as there's progress, it's a training. We want to do a little bit better over time, but we do we do want to be as we want to be as truthful as we can be. So Lord Buddha says, keep those precepts strictly to the letter. Yes, satya, truthfulness. I talked about that earlier. If you want to realize the truth, you have to be truthful. You don't want to make, and this doesn't mean you have to be cruel. There's a way to present the truth. Try to be as gentle and kind as you can, but with yourself as well. But uncompromisingly truthful. Adhitthana, determination. And we make determinations in areas where we need to improve. We make determinations. And then if we keep the determination we make, so suppose that this week I determine I'm going to meditate once a day for the entire week. At the end of the week, if you kept that adhitthana, then you've increased your capacity to be determined. Okay, might have 1 day off, the next 10 days I'm going to meditate. You keep it for 10 days. And but if you make the adhitthana, you keep the adhitthana. And this is training in stretching your capacity to do things. I've done that a lot in my monk's life, practicing 6 hours a day in Bodh Gaya, increasing to 8, increasing to 8.5, increasing to 9, increasing to 10. I even did 11 hours a day for 10 days, just to prove to myself, because there's always that sense of I can't do anymore, I can't do anymore. When that manifested, I'm like, no, I'm going to show this mind that it can do more. So 11 hours a day for 10 days. And then I went back to 10 hours. And then I 9.5 is actually kind of easy, comfortable in Bodh Gaya. But going to 11 for a period of time was like just to show the mind, you can do more than you think you can. And we need to have a lot of determination if we are going to cross from samsara to nibbana. And so practicing adhitthana, loving kindness, metta, thoughts of kindness, and acting on thoughts of kindness, upekkha. So sometimes we have to be equanimous, tell ourselves to be equanimous until we actually are. That's where the patience comes in, and that's where the thinking wisely comes in. You are contemplating karma so that you can be, suppose you are really jealous, suppose you are really competitive, then you remind yourself that whatever a person has is, sometimes people get rich or get in powers of influence because of unethical behavior. What's really interesting though is they must have been generous and virtuous in a past life to be able to get that position. But they became deluded. And it's actually really sad because they're destroying their roots of virtue and making bad karma. And the next life, they won't have the opportunities that they had. So, but if anybody gets into a position of power and influence and wealth, they have been generous and respectful in the past. And then they get deluded by it. And it's like when Lord Buddha realized Nibbana, he had some reluctance to teach about it because he said beings had a lot of dust in their eyes and were so committed to self, being a self, and that what he had realized goes against the nature of the world. And he said, samsara is just full of beings going up and down on the other shore, from the heavens to the hells, from the heavens to the hells, up and down. It's like snakes and ladders. People take a few steps forward, get deluded again, get arrogant, get conceited, have unskillful behavior, lose their opportunities, have a low birth after that, and then up and down, up and down. But if you're getting a bit fed up with that, and if you want to cross over into the Nibbana element and relinquish the self-view that causes so much suffering, then you need to cultivate the 4 Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, become familiar with those 10 paramis and work on them. You might not want to work on them to the point of Buddhahood, but we all need to have some of these qualities so that you can become a stream enterer and eventually an arahant. And then the metta and the mindfulness practice, the mindfulness, the breath meditation, the mindfulness practices, the metta, keeping the precepts, all of this sensitizes the mind, establishes a presence of mind. Luang Por Chah has that beautiful analogy that there's like a seat in the mind and we have to be sitting in that seat so that whatever guests come into the mind, they're recognized, but they don't take over. They come in the door, they might come in the door, but then they leave because there's something sitting in the seat. That's presence of mind, mindfulness with clear comprehension. And it gets developed through consistent meditation, being generous and keeping the precepts. So if the presence of mind is there, the negative qualities will arise for a period of time, but we don't make much karma with them and we don't allow them to fully take over. So that's, but the metta practice and the frequent meditation is what will sensitize the mind. And so something you might have thought in the past that something was wholesome, because that's delusion. And as your mindfulness and your Brahma Viharas develop, the same mindset comes around and you recognize, oh, that's actually unwholesome. I'm not going to act on that. This is a wonderful thing about mindfulness as it deepens. This is sometimes translated as truth discerning awareness. So the more mindfulness you have, you just begin to recognize. That's the wonderful thing about this path, is your own capacity to recognize this is wholesome, this is unwholesome. It gets sharper and sharper and clearer. And you trust that mindfulness with clear comprehension more and more. And the more you trust it, the more well-being you have and the more confidence you have in the path. And so please support yourself in this process by keeping your precepts, being generous, doing your daily meditation. And as you recognize the negative qualities which affect your mind, when you become familiar with that list, try to be patient, try to be kind. So it's people who even are willing to do this work are rare. And sometimes we have to give ourselves a pat on the back that you're willing to have a look at the darkness. You're willing to have a smell of the stench. You're willing to put the boots on and get into the mud. And it's wonderful. It's noble. And there's that kind of attitude is affirmed by Luang Por Chah, who makes these fabulous, profound statements such as, the place of practice is where the suffering is. That's one very interesting statement I love to consider. Purity is in the same place as impurity. So what does that mean? So if you have a negative mind state, an impure mind state, that's in your body and mind, isn't it? It's here. And when you establish the mindfulness and patient endurance and determination to be ethical and virtuous, the mind state falls away. And then what do you have? You have purity. But it's in that same place. And that, I think that they're saying the same thing. The place where the suffering is the place to practice. The place where the impurity is where the purity is, where the purity will arise. So there's a few reasons I love those condensed teachings, because it actually means suffering and impurity have an infinite potential. And so we shouldn't judge ourselves for having suffering and impurity. But we should be very, very interested in understanding, what does Luang Por Chah mean, that where the suffering is, that's where the place of practice is. Where the impurity is, that's where the purity is. Because if we really establish that mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, clear comprehension in your body and mind consistently, the suffering falls away, the impurity falls away, because mindfulness sees things as they are, and it lets go of ignorance and delusion. And the more you practice, the more quickly you will recognize delusion. That's deluded, because the antidote to ignorance is mindfulness with clear comprehension. Ignorance is not knowing. Mindfulness with clear comprehension is knowing as things are. That's the antidote. The more mindfulness and clear comprehension you have, the ignorance and the delusion can't stay. That's like taking the seat in the mind and the guests have to leave. So I've been talking for a long time. I'd probably better let you go. Some of you have full days ahead of you. Some of you it's late, but I hope that some of what I said this evening has been helpful and encouraging to you. I rejoice in your interest in the Dhamma and listening to this funny old middle-aged monk in northeast Thailand yakking on. I wish you every success in your practice. May you weaken and uproot your attachment to the defilements through cultivating mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, supported by the 4 Brahma Viharas. I wish you every success in your practice. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering.